Hello, welcome to another edition of Low Code Campfire. This is episode number 157 for August 2, 2024. We don't have anything specific planned, so we're going to call it Open Lines Friday. But let me introduce myself. I am Dale Warner, Head of Support for Plant and App, joined capably today by Radu Florescu, who will introduce himself in a few minutes. This is an event we do every week at 10 a.m. Central Time where we get together and just talk about Plant and App, the challenges that we face, the things that we've gotten accomplished, maybe get some ideas from our compatriots. So bring something to show, be ready or to ask, I guess, and be ready to help. We record all these and put them out on YouTube. So youtube.com/plantandapp will get you lots and lots of very good content. So subscribe to that channel. This is the agenda that will follow today and every week. We always do introductions. We always start with first call and anything submitted, and there is a topic submitted today, so that's good. And then we'll get to some of these other things, but then after an hour or so, we turn off the recording, go into our Afterglow segment where we can just chat about this or anything else for a little while longer. So do engage with us. You can submit questions and topics in advance with this QR code, or you can email me directly at support@plantandapp.com, and we'll add those to the agenda. And hello all from across the world.
Hi, Dan. Hi, everybody.
Radu, I hate to put you on the spot, but I'm going to do it anyway. Do you want to say hello, explain who you are if anyone hasn't met you, and I'll just say this is one of the nicest guys that I've had the pleasure of knowing within Plant and App. He took care of getting Jeannie and I to the airport when we went to Romania. We had far too much luggage that would never have fit in any normal Uber, so he got us to the airport and then took his kids to school and then went to work. It was anyway.
Thank
So
you, Del. Anyway, it was my pleasure. But after you left Romania, we decided to move to Luxembourg. So if you're back to Romania, you will have to find some other arrangements. Anyway, yeah. So everyone, thank you, Del, for the introduction. Happy to meet everyone. I've been with Plant and App for 2 years, and I lead the partnerships team at Plant and App. And as you will see in the upcoming episodes and in the upcoming weeks, we decided to have more people from our team in Plant and App join this event, the Campfire and the Low Code Cafe, because we want to be closer to the community. And I know that Dale and Patrick did a great job, but I think they will need maybe some assistance going forward. So in the upcoming episodes, we'll also try to invite other engineers from different places around the world, not only in Romania. So yeah, again, it's part of our ongoing efforts to be closer to the community, to our customers and partners.
absolutely. And
Thank you very much, Dale.
with Patrick out to an undisclosed location and having a great time as near as I can tell, it's great to have you join us.
Thank you, Dale.
But Patrick will be back in 2 weeks, where we have another special guest scheduled for next week. So hopefully that'll be a good one. All right. So with
Hello.
that, I'm
Just
sorry,
wanted
jump
to
in.
say hello to Radu.
Hi, Mark. Pleasure to meet you.
So we start out always with first call. If anybody's got something that needs to be addressed, we try and push that right up front, and then we'll get to some other topics. So anybody have anything that would qualify under a first call? Great. Nobody has any problems. Okay. So I'm just going to talk a little bit. We've released version 126. It's been out a month and a half now. I mentioned a few known issues from last time, and I will. There's a couple of more that I know about. I talked about one in Low Code Cafe, but in case you missed that, there's this, and I can demonstrate this if you have any interest. But in workflows, there's a kind of a weird one where if you're building a condition in a workflow and you add a space to the end of it, of course, it doesn't look like anything, but for some reason that breaks workflow. I'm sure we'll have a fix very soon, but um, knowing that you should just be very careful with your conditions not to add a trailing space will save you 10 minutes of heartache. If you have questions on that one, again, I'd be happy to show it, but also refer back to Low Code Cafe, the From the Trenches segment this week, and you'll see exactly a full demo of that. And then Patrick was showing me some of his great work. He's been doing enhancements to the SQL Console. SQL Console is all plant and app low code, so we try to build the product with both code at the code level from the engineers, developers, and then pieces of it are developed with low code. So we're taking advantage of our own product within the product, and that's SQL Console is one of those. And so he was showing off these great new features, and I'm going to show that here in a bit. But and I suppose I'm taking his thunder, but he's out. He can't stop me. But anyway, in that where he's using the hierarchy view and at a particular version, this 526.68, if you're using the hierarchy view, you might want to hold off from updating until we get a fix for that. But it's just I don't know, small bug, but depending on how you use it, it might be very annoying to you. So I'll show that off. Any questions on 126? Any comments on 126? Jim's connecting to audio. All right, we'll back up to that if someone wants to. Mark, I'm going to put you on the spot first, mostly because you said, first of all, you sent me an email and you called it a campfire log, and I love it that you're trying to extend our metaphor for getting around the campfire and talking. So you threw a log on the fire. You were dealing with PayPal Express checkout, and you said you had something to say about it.
Hey, Dale, I'm pleased you caught that reference. And I expected no less. So sorry about the camera. I don't know what's going on. Maybe I'll get that fixed by the time we're done. But yeah, so the issue that I have noticed is that I use the PayPal connection on multiple forms on multiple sites. And so, I've been doing it for a long time, so I pretty much know what I'm doing, and it works. But I have noticed that recently, and I don't know how recent it was, it could have been a month or a week, but when people get sent over to PayPal Express to make their payment there, the screen that they're seeing is different than it was. And I don't think that's a low code thing at all, but I wanted to change it back to the way it was. And so that involves plant and app again. What's going on is people weren't being permitted to pass through the payment without having a PayPal account. And my customers didn't really want to have a PayPal account, at least not all of them did. So it appears that going into the PayPal settings and going to the right place where you can enable pass-through without payment, without a PayPal account, either just going to that page or going to that page and toggling the setting off and then back on again. In my case, it was already turned on. That seems to fix it. So, quirky thing about PayPal, you have to go tickle the settings to get it to do what you set it to do. But here's where it comes into plant and app. It appears that going and changing a setting in the PayPal might be a thing that is causing the connection between the form and the PayPal to break. So what I've seen is after tickling those PayPal settings, I go back to the form and I try to send through a transaction and it fails. It won't go to PayPal. It just throws up an error. And it says a couple different things, but the primary one is check your credentials. You're sending the wrong information over to PayPal. And I know it's right because it was right, an hour ago, but
Mhm.
I'll try things. And then what it comes down to is if I go into the PayPal Express action and I just simply paste back in there the API password, the API, those three settings, I don't have them memorized. If I just paste them back in there and save, then it all works again. And so something, and this is, I suspect that it's changing a PayPal setting, although I am not sure. It just seems to break the connection between the form and the PayPal. And I just thought I would bring it up and say, hey, you can fix this by putting your settings back in. But at the same time, I would ask the question, has anyone else seen this?
So,
Anyone else use PayPal? Yeah, if you haven't seen it, it either means it's not a problem for you or you're not using PayPal. Yeah, okay.
so I wanted to add a couple of thoughts to that. Now I'm trying to sneeze, sorry. There it is. You were talking about having to tickle the settings within PayPal, and I hadn't heard that one before, but I have seen it even in our product. There's a setting, and I suppose that's worth a mention when we get there, get through this topic. Remind me, and I'll tell you about one of the spots you have to tickle with us. But the fact that you have to do that, that's good information. The that it breaks the connection is very odd because, as many of you may know, when you fill in forms when you fill in the administrative screens within Plant an App to do, for example, the PayPal Express action, that all those things are saved in a configuration file. And the configuration file wouldn't change. And the fact that you're having to paste back things and in order to get it to work, that is odd. But the fact that they are configuration files is kind of useful to know because, for example, you can, and here's the PayPal Express checkout action. And it has the password and the signature in it. If you
Yeah,
encounter this again, I think it would be very helpful if as soon as you realize you've had to mess with the PayPal settings, now your action doesn't work anymore, but before you fix it, if you would export the action and drop it into a WordPad or something, Notepad, something. So this would be the before image of what you're doing. And then whatever you have to do to fix it and make it work again, changing the password, the signature, whatever. Once you get it to work again, if you were to also then export that again, the difference between those two would tell us maybe something about, something changed in order to make it work, right? So hopefully that will be help us get down to the bottom of it, and maybe there's a code change that we can make that avoids that problem. Does that make sense?
yeah, that makes sense. That's a good strategy. Thank you. I will add to this conversation that I've had the situation where the connection just stopped working without me knowingly making a change to the PayPal account. So, and going in here and repasting the API username, password, and signature just fixes it. It could be true that someone else changed the PayPal account because it's actually a client's, it's not mine. So they might have done something. I don't know, but from where I sit, it seems like it's a temperamental connection. Like I have to come in here when things aren't working, I have to re-put those three things back in.
So username, password, signature, all those three.
Yeah, well, I don't know, like maybe
You don't know
one,
which
we
one.
need to do one, I don't know, but I just do them all three.
Yep. So great. I mean, I hope you never have the problem again, but it sounds like it's pretty frequent for you.
It's
So
enough, frequent enough.
it would help. And then, if you paste that stuff, or at least a comparison, I don't know, do you have a compare file utility that you use?
I haven't used one for quite a while.
If I mean, I, here's the thing. It's all confidential information, so I don't necessarily need you to pass me the production stuff, but if you'll either describe what the difference is, you can send the files and I'll do the comparison and we'll get rid of them. But at some level, we need to. I suspect it's going to be in the passwords of in this in those three items that is the difference. So hopefully we'll track it down.
Okay, thank you. That's a good strategy. I would add to this conversation that I've noticed that if the user cancels at PayPal, which is something I've been doing a lot of,
Yep.
there's a setting in the action where I can determine where they land back on the website. And
Yes.
it's just generating an error now. It's not listening to the redirection. And I know I'm not assigning it to a message. I'm redirecting to a portal page. And
Yep.
on 1.26, I don't know if that is a glitch or if it's just me. I don't know yet.
Well, I'm going to, let's see, there is this on cancel section,
That's the one.
and I don't know if you noticed a second ago, I did a cancel and I got that same problem. Here's well, I have this turned off. That explains. Okay, so I'm redirecting to a URL and I have this big long URL that I'm passing. So, and I got an error. So I was going to investigate that too. This wasn't previously a problem. So I'll I'll dig into that a little bit more too and see if we can figure out what's going on.
Yeah, the top of the error message says something about pretty print. And that's about it. The rest of the page is white for me.
So let's try this. I'm going to submit a charge, and we have the cancel and return to the store. And yeah, I'm getting a complete error. It's messing up my URL quite well. And I don't know what's going on with that. So,
Yeah, I'm getting a different error message, just so you know. So something seems to be going on there, or not.
and yeah, we have been working in the area of these redirects, trying to resolve some other issues. So we might have introduced something else. It's worth playing with here for just a second. So it is to me anyway. This is one of our bigger actions that it has so many different areas to work with. What I'm going to do, this one is falsed out. I'm also going to false out. I'm going to clone this one and then false it out as well, because this one used to work.
So Dale, when I false something out, I'll put a marker in the description so I know at a glance that it's been turned off. This is a little programming practice.
I do something like this typically. Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah, that's what I'm talking about. I just put a 0 there since I just use a 0 as a condition.
Of course, I hit the wrong thing, so we get to start all over again. Saving. So following good practice here. Disabled. This one is trying to go to, oh, this will be fine. We'll send it to the books page. And doesn't matter where it's going. I just want to see that it's working.
I've tried that checkbox both on and off about using URL provider.
Yep.
It didn't make a difference to me.
So some settings work, some don't, and this one, that redirect did work. So we have I have a before and an after image. I'm trying to figure out what might be. Apparently some things are causing problems. I'll try one more test here.
There's so often that it's a detail that makes it work.
And I need to double check my URL and make sure it's still a good one. I'll just do this whole. Sending it back to the page that I came from, and yeah. So the point is, some settings work, some settings don't. I'm gonna, yeah, who knows what that is. So I'll dig into that one a little bit more later.
Okay, so would anyone care to recommend a different payment processor? Do you have trouble with what you're using, or is it better than that in what I'm describing?
What is the other one that we have here? So we have authorize payments, PayPal. I'm drawing a blank on one of our other Stripe. We use Stripe a great deal.
You have trouble with it like I do with PayPal?
We use it for our subscriptions, so I'm assuming they've gotten it to work and work reliably. I've done a little bit with it, but not a lot. I remember we might have a Stripe contribution. Yeah, you can take a look at we've got an implementation here out on
Oh, great. Yeah.
and Ben is pointing out that there's a bunch of my tokens in that, and that I agree that's probably the area of difference, and I'll dig into that and see if that's what's going on with that. Cool.
Cool.
So
Thank you.
thanks for bringing a topic up in advance. Since it was part of that conversation, I will mention. I mentioned that we had a setting that doesn't do what I would hope it would do. One of our settings that you have to tickle. In our listings module, any listings, there is in version any version that has the data table, that now there is this setting show skeleton while loading, and there's a current error that there's a bug that's been documented on this. This shows a checkbox that says that it's got the skeleton, but when you define one of the a data table in the first place, it has this checked, but it is in fact not active. So you don't get the benefit of this if you just click it and click it again. Then it is in fact on, and so when you save it, then you'll get a skeleton. This is very cosmetic, but it doesn't change the functionality of your page at all. But if you want to show a skeleton while loading, you actually have to click it and click it again. Anybody use the skeleton feature?
What does that skeleton look like?
Let's take a look. So I'm going to go to the page. You're going to see it here as it loads. It's this.
Okay.
It fills the form with where things are going to be, much like Facebook and Twitter and whatever, so that you can anticipate and yeah. And so with no delay, it just refreshes the page. It happens immediately. And if we turn that off, let's take a look at that. We can do that. But don't show the skeleton.
Looks like it's also reserving some vertical space on the page.
It does. So I've got a 5-second delay built into this page refresh so that we can see it. So you see this this area here that's flashing saying, hey, I'm working, and then all of a sudden it pops into existence. So with skeleton, it reserves some space. That's what skeleton does. It's just a cosmetic. But if you're not seeing it on your listings and they take a minute to load, you can check and uncheck that box and it'll begin to work.
Thank you.
Always thinking about enhancements, Ben. Might be a nice enhancements to say how many rows we want to do.
Yeah.
That would be nice.
Thinking that too.
I don't know how they decide on that, what it's doing. All right, so thanks for that contribution, the
Thank you, Dale.
PayPal Express. Anybody have a first call that they want to talk about or any other topic before I bring something else into it? Another log for the fire, as Mark has added. All right, I ran into one, and actually this source is back 2.5 years, and something that Ben did. Yesterday I had a duh moment. I was working on, let me find it here. I was working on a very old ticket where there was a request about being able to show tooltips. And let me go to a form. Not every, actually, I'm going to go to my test form. Give me a second, I'll find it here. So you should have a tooltip on everything. That's the idea, that we have this, we have a form. It has, in a text box, you have this short description, and this is supposed to generate a tooltip. And there were some field types that it wasn't generating a tooltip. Specifically, we've got everything, I think, now except currency. And it also, oddly enough, changes depending on the label alignment that you choose, because I think it ends up running into different rendering logic. And so you'll see, for example, that the phone has this, and I'm using a token, an arbitrary token in here just to prove that tokens is working. But it says text box and phone and large text and number. Most things have it. Some things don't. Single file upload drop down doesn't have it. You can have a title field and it works, a static text field and it works, but currency didn't. And so this was brought up. Hey, universally, it'd be nice if these things worked. And so the duh moment is that if I knew, I didn't remember that in settings, there is this advanced setting that says show tooltips. And when that is activated, you get an eye on all your field titles. And now it's universally visual. Now, it is at least an answer to the question, being even for currency, your tooltips are going to show up, or and everything else they're present. You might not like the eye. That's another thing, but at least it's an answer to, hey, I always want my tooltips to show up even for drop downs and for single file uploads. So was it just me that missed that this setting even existed, or is that new information?
Just you, Dale.
Okay. Well, you're a form specialist. I know you are. You do it all day long, so I'm not surprised that you knew that. But then, and while we're talking about it, when you click show tooltips, there's this next thing that says show tooltip title. And so now, instead of just showing the tooltip, if you refresh with that option enabled, it shows the name of the field, the title of the field as well. So it gives you some great functionality that, man, I didn't even know it was there. So again, I think this goes back to one that you submitted, Ben. And my question then for you is, without using this, I mean, we're considering this one functional because you can turn on tooltips and always get them. Without it turned on, you're now it's field type by field type what the behavior is, and some field types aren't going to display that. So would you consider this good enough?
I have to go back because this was a while back ago and I don't even
2.5
really
years.
recall, but yeah, I would say the only situation with flipping on that switch and showing that little eye is if by chance you have a field and you didn't give it a name for the title, then you're just going to have a floating eye out there, and that might look a little odd to users. I would think, being able to hover over the field, I think is more commonly accepted and understood than seeing an eye on every single field. But again, that's just me.
I wanted to see what that would look like. They're not in the spirit of arguing, but in the spirit of potential. Where did it go? With no title, the eye, it doesn't show up at all. Oh, nah, never mind. Got to do the settings. All right, so we're going to show tooltips and title, save. Yes, so you're absolutely right. You do get a floating I. It excludes the title because there is none, and so it could be the way you described it, and it could be a feature, not a bug, right? If you just want a floating I for that thing. So we'll in any case, it is what it's doing, and I was the only one that didn't know.
Dale, doesn't the eye also make that available on a touch screen, like on a phone, where you can't hover, but you can tap an eye? Isn't that right?
Well, anybody pull out their phone and double check? I'm going to do it. Yes, it is. Absolutely.
So that's a pretty nice benefit of having the eye there. And I have seen the eyes on other websites as well, so I don't think they're that uncommon.
As I was experimenting with all this, and yeah, right alignment looks a little bit nicer and makes it connected to the field. I was looking, and this is the way action form has been for a very long time, prior to Bootstrap 5 and things like this. It was there, and I probably used this early on, but I've slept since then. Okay, moving on. I took a look at the Campfire contribution website. I didn't put anything out there, neither did you guys. So, but I will, for everyone who's on the call or listening later, just mention that campfire.plantanapp.com is the place where we put all of our demonstratable techniques. And so if you're looking to do something, or it's worth being familiar with what's out there, so that when it's time for you to do it, you'll have a pattern that you can follow. So do take a look at that. I was talking about Patrick's great work about SQL Console, and I'm pretty impressed by this, so I wanted to show it off. SQL Console is now using the hierarchy view, so instead of just displaying and instead of displaying it as I think it was a form field type, now it's actually a listing that has all the different tables in your database, and they are split out by namespace, I guess that is. So just in the same way as before, you can click on something and that gives you you can paste, gives you something to paste from. I guess I'll show you the bug first. Uh, if you click on the first item, in some cases, it'll just, or maybe open up. Yeah, if you open it up, things might disappear. And so that's kind of annoying. So that's the bug that we have going on. But it's only when you're trying to expand the first item of some things on the list anyway. So now onto the exciting parts of it. Yes, you can open this up and you can click and you can still copy and paste things and have them, but there's, because it's a listing, we now have more things, and so we have, for example, the ability to create a select for a table, much like SQL Server Management Studio would do. So now you're ready to go to create a select. There's a create an insert. So if you're trying to do some work inserting into a table, it's got a nice structured format. So now you just have to fill in the blanks, either provide actual values or past bind values.
You're right. That is pretty nifty.
Here's an update statement. So you've got update billing and all the things you can set. You have to set your own where condition. And I was, Patrick did a good job here. The fact that the where condition is represented this way means that, and the same way with the delete, you can't just build it and then click go and it starts deleting things. It's built kind of broken. If you don't fix it, it won't work. But like the update, you can remove the things that you don't want to update, and that's probably easier than building things in the first place. And then one that I liked quite a bit because yeah, so there's the delete that's happening as well. I'm getting all these different formats, and now I'm just exploring a little bit because there's these create, select, create, update on the field level. So let's see what that does. Yeah, so if you just want to focus in on one field, you can start with that. You can do it at the table level and it does everything. So if you're really only trying to update one field, you can create an update for that one thing and add more things to it. But anyway, it gives you a nice starting spot. And then there's this one here, get column schema. And that just puts things on the clipboard. I'm going to paste it here just so we can see it. But it has the name of the table and all the field definitions right there ready for you to use. What the intended purpose for this, who knows what else you might do with it, but if you copy and paste this into an AI, a chat GPT, for example, and say, I have a billing table, it relates to a something else table and I want to do this, you can get AI to write the work for you to do that, because now it understands your schema and can work from that. So to demonstrate that, if like I've got books here that have chapters, and so if the format of that is book, chapter, chapters, and so we can go to AI and say so bang, you get the join, and it did a did a great job at doing that. So that's the intended purpose of being able to get a hold of the schema. But who knows what else you might want to do with it. Didn't Patrick do good work?
Yeah, that's great. It's good stuff. Makes this page more useful than before.
Yep. For anyone following along, the SQL Console is enabled in the General tab. You can turn it on or off. So if it's not visible for you, just turn it on, and then we have it here. With great power comes great responsibility. The delete really works. So you got to know what you're doing with SQL, but this can save you a ton of time. And it keeps you from having to open up SQL Server Management Studio quite as often. I used to build those kind of things interactively with SSMS, and this kind of just does that work. There's also some, if you have other connectors, this is a new feature that's built in here. So you can define connectors within database. I just have the built-in database one here, but if you added a new connector of type database connection and gave it a name and filled out all the information, then this drop down would become functional, and you could choose between databases. So if you wanted to query in another one, and I haven't seen it, but I believe it will retrieve the correct hierarchy for that database when you do that as well. So for those of you dealing in multiple databases, that should be just one other tool in your tool belt. Okay. So sometimes we talk about low-code playbook, and so there's the suggestion when you're doing a workflow, don't loop through lists in the same workflow. And I thought that would be, this is kind of an interesting one. Might be interesting to talk about, but here's the suggestion. There's not a lot of detail in it, but they're saying don't loop through the list. You could create the list and then call another workflow to do the one item. So I guess you are in fact looping through the list, but instead of building a big action stack that does the work within one flow, it's saying branch out, do the work in another workflow. So first of all, does that make sense to anybody or cause any controversy? And I mean, why that might be useful?
I'd like to hear an explanation on why that recommendation is.
Well, so again, this is submitted by, I'm almost certain this was submitted by Bogdan. I think this is the reasoning. You can keep the logic clean, and many actions in a list with sub-actions is harder to maintain. But when I've encountered workflows like this, one of the nice benefits that you get is, since you're calling another workflow with one item, that workflow becomes very testable, right? If we're processing through books, for example, and you're calling a workflow to do something on a book, that the input to that workflow is a book number. So as a developer, as you're working on it and you're testing, you can focus on, does this workflow do the thing that accomplish the goal for what I was trying to do for a book, and very, save and test, ready to run. And so then that logic is very discrete and tested. And so when you're calling it from somewhere else, it's going to do what you expect it to do. Versus if you have a stack of actions inside of an execute actions for each item, and now it's embedded into the workflow, it can't be called from anywhere else, and it's harder to test at the unit level. It can be done, but you have to tinker with your logic to say, well, I really only want one record in the list so I can test it. And so I think that's the logic. Does that make sense?
Yeah, Dale, forgive me, is there a way to visualize which workflows are calling on or using other workflows, like a dependency tree?
I don't believe there is.
I'm thinking, once you start getting a big stack of workflows, and some of them are modular, like you're suggesting, the temptation is to reuse a workflow in other scenarios, and then it becomes pretty scary to think about modifying what could be a sub workflow. Where
Right,
else is that being called?
Yes, you do have the responsibility now of making sure that if this discrete workflow does something that is used in 5 places and you change it, is that appropriate in all the 5 places? And where is it coming from? So I think that's that's a valid concern.
But for me, that winds up multiplying my workflows, because instead of altering one that I think is being used in multiple places, I'll copy it and make a new one for something that I needed a change for. And then I have multiple that are doing virtually the same thing. It's kind of messy.
So if you did it, I agree. If you work that way, then you're going to create you've got the same problem as having the execute actions for each that have a large stack. You get into having too many and it's hard to follow. So strategies for that, one is document very well. I mean, first of all, I want to start with, we could do better. Knowing where where that workflow was called from would remove the fear, or at least you could mitigate the problem. Another possibility is that you can add a parameter to the input side to that if it's a special condition that's only one workflow, you could accommodate the condition by passing in a parameter, and it only does the new thing based on the new parameter, and it continues to do the old work based on the old parameter, based on no parameter. And Ben had his hand up.
You basically said what I was going to say, in what relation to what Mark said about cloning a workflow and then tweaking it to do something, slightly differently. Exactly what you just said is I've done situations like that, and for me, just to prevent having too many workflows out there that just do some minor differences, I add a parameter to the workflow, just basically enhancing it. And I basically set it up so if there's no parameter, it behaves as the way it always did, so it doesn't break anything. But if you do add a parameter value, it will do some sort of a split logic and then do something else that's new. So that way everything is still in one workflow, and then you just, split off your differences as needed.
I don't know, guys. I'm thinking for ease of understanding what's going on in a workflow, my current preference is to keep that logic within the workflow. I see that you're working on best practices, but that one's going to be a tough one for me to get comfortable with, I guess is what it comes down to. I don't want a bunch of workflows sitting around that I don't know where they're being used. Can I get rid of them? Can I clean them up? All that kind of stuff.
Part of me agrees with Mark, only because, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, Dale.
No, please.
All I was going to say was, like Mark said, sometimes having too many workflows can get a little unwieldy because then your workflow is going to get really large, and you have to basically organize that and keep it understandable. I would only use this type of logic of splitting out to a secondary workflow in a list if I know that secondary workflow is going to be something that can be utilized elsewhere directly. But if it's a situation where that logic I know is only ever going to be utilized within that workflow, I would never split it out, because then it just becomes multiple workflows that I have to contend with and deal with.
Yep. So, out of curiosity, are you using the namespace functionality much? And I'm just saying
I
that.
am.
Yeah, I do too. Yeah.
I'm saying that in that it might help you to organize those things. Again, the counter argument to what you just said, Ben, and I'm not advocating, I'm not arguing, I'm just saying counter argument would be the testability of that thing, right? Being able to save and test and
Truth be told, what I do lots of times, and I mean, I know it's a little hacky, but in situations like what you were saying for testability, sometimes what I'll do is if there's a large action stack, I'll put it in an execute actions block, even though there's no conditions. I'll just throw it in there, because then what I can do is if I want to test that stack for something minor, like, one record or one particular instance, I can export that entire stack, throw it into another workflow really quick, just run it with a quick test of parameters, check that that stack of actions works, and when I'm done, I delete that workflow.
Yep.
Yeah.
And I don't consider that hackish. I think that's a good technique. I try to put things inside execute actions as well, just so, because I mean they're grouped and they're as a functionality together. Have we talked about workflow contracts at all? I was just going to take a look at this real quick to see if this is going to help us.
I don't think I'm familiar with that.
The new feature
Is that a
coming up,
126 thing?
it's a 127 thing, so you haven't seen it at all. You may not have seen it at all yet. But what I was trying to see is if this is going to answer the question about, yes, what workflows use what contracts. So the idea is that up until now, workflows have allowed, let's go to a workflow. Workflows have allowed inputs and outputs, and you define them, and they're just freeform. This is the new feature, and it might only be available on our enterprise version. I don't know how it's going to be released, but it's a new tab within workflows that you define a contract, and so we'll edit it. And so this doesn't do anything. It only says that the contract says a workflow will have these inputs and these outputs. And so any workflow that is designed to do this functionality follows this contract. So the idea is, especially around the idea of dynamic workflow situations where you're saying, I have this process, and when we get to this point in the process, it's customizable, and we're going to insert a different workflow here to do the work depending on the conditions. So think about the notification system that I was working on last low-code cafe. We're sending out notifications. You might have an emailer. You might have something that sends the notification to Teams, something else that sends it to SMS, and so the workflow that's going to get used to deliver the notification is dynamic. It will just be decided at runtime, but you want all of those delivery methods to abide by the same contract. You're going to be sending it what notification needs to be delivered, and that might be the only input. More complex ones might have multiple inputs. Anyway, that's the idea behind contracts, that all the workflows in that that are going to get used in that circumstance meet the contract. And in that sense, if you're using that feature, then the workflows that follow are all in the same place, so that you could, if you're changing what the workflow is supposed to do, that you can see all the different places that you need to change. I think this is actually an inverse thing. You're an inverse way of thinking about it, that we have multiple workflows doing the same job in a different way, and what we were talking about a minute ago was calling one workflow to do one functionality. and so it being the subordinate. Anyway, so I guess maybe aside from badly introducing the contract feature, this is pointing out that we recognize that there are some cases where you need to know where these things are used. So I think we could do some improvement in this area to say, let's again, talking about a workflow, to know where a workflow is edited. If we had a tab here to say, where is this called from, it would be useful to be able to navigate backwards, not just forwards. Man, I did that bad. So
Ben's got his
we,
hand up again.
oh, please, Ben, yes.
Sorry. So I just wanted to clarify on that contract thing. Unless I'm thinking of it incorrectly, it almost sounds like that's a type of prototyping. I mean, that's like the terminology would use in programming. It's just basically saying to the system, we're going to use this method, and these are the inputs expected for this particular method. So you're basically saying contracts are kind of a way of prototyping workflows so that the inputs and outputs are predefined and expected prior to, or when defining them so that they stay within a specific schema.
I think what you said makes sense. It aligns with it. Yes, it's defining an expectation of how, and any workflow that is going to be used in that way should, and especially if you could use it to define only one workflow to nail down what the inputs and outputs were. And so what you just said would be for that. And then if there are multiple workflows that are doing the same work, they should all follow the same contract. So
I'm just curious. So then if you create a contract and then assign that to a workflow, does the input and output tabs of the workflow disappear because the contract is now handling that?
no, this is a workflow that's assigned to a contract. So the inputs and outputs don't disappear, but they are locked down. And then you can have additional ones as well. So it conforms to the contract, but you can.
So the contract is a minimum, not an enforceable.
Correct.
Okay. Because I was going to say, if you can change it, then now you're violating the contract. So it's kind of like these are the minimum default requirements
Yes.
for input and output for a workflow.
Yes.
Okay.
Interesting point, though, the fact that you mentioned that. I will bring up the question of whether you want to. We could, I would guess, have an option on the contract to say whether it's a minimum or a exact requirement. That could be a checkbox here. Sounds like
Yeah, that would be nice only because if people start using contracts and then forget, let's say that a workflow is based off of a contract and then they go and make a change that could potentially violate the business logic or whatnot, or make things more complicated instead of modifying the contract, instead of the workflow. It would be nice if the contract had a, must enforce identical or something like that.
I think that's an interesting idea, and so I'll bring that up to our product team. We've gone a couple of minutes over, and so I'm just going to call it here. Good discussion. Glad that you joined us. In just a minute, I'm going to turn off the recording, and we'll do our afterglow segment. So you're welcome to hang around for a few minutes if you like. And other than that, we'll see you again next week. Thanks for joining.